guys, it's Alec Torelli, and welcome back to a special holiday episode of The Hand of the Day. It's freezing here in New York City, but I'm cozy in this apartment, shooting this at nighttime for you guys. So I give you a lot of information in this hand. This is one of my rants about all the hand ranges that our opponents could have. I really go into serious detail about how you should make each decision in this hand, but I go even into more detail on my blog at the end of this video. So be sure to check out alectorelli.com. The link is right in the description. Click on it. You'll see all the range analysis that I use in my personal game, how I make these decisions, and how I sort of formulate my thoughts and rationale behind how to make these decisions for any type of opponent and going forward in the future. Real cool tools that are absolutely free on my blog that I think will help your game a lot. So be sure to check this out after this video. For now, we're going to get to the hand of the day. This hand is from John, who's playing a 5-10 game live in the Philippines. Let's check it out. So our hero in the hand, in this case John's friend, but we're going to say John raises under the gun $50 in a 5-10 cash game. It's a big raise, 5x open, but it's sort of standard for how the game plays, especially under the gun. Raising big is a little more normal here. So he makes a big raise under the gun. Good player calls to a few positions to his left, and another good player calls behind him. They go 3 ways to the flop. The pot's 165 bucks, and the flop comes queen of spades, 8 of spades, 5 of clubs. So we flop a good flush draw, easy spot to continuation bet here. We could rep an overpair, great spot to bet, and if a spade comes, of course, we are happy. So this is a great spot to c-bet here. We go ahead and c-bet 160 bucks, which is the size of the pot, much on the bigger side. But in live poker, it's really important to consider that your bet sizing isn't always perceived the same way it is online. So just because you bet 160 here, unless your opponents are really calculating the pot size, or more importantly, if your bet seems abnormally large or abnormally small, then that's something to weigh into. But just the fact that you bet close to the pot isn't necessarily something that gives credence to the strength of your hand. In this spot, I think a lot of times players will bet 150. They raise 50 pre-flop, they just bet 150. And even though that's on the bigger size, people generally bet in increments of their chips, so they'll bet 100 or 150. It doesn't really mean as much as it would mean in an online game where people can see the pot specifically, and people bet much more uniformly. Is that a word? They bet much more normally online with the same bet sizing as everybody else. So anyway, we bet 160. The guy to our left calls, and the other guy folds. Turn comes an ace of spades. Now, we go ahead and bet 190. We turn the nuts, great spot for us, and we bet really, really small on the turn here, less than half the pot. And it's a good spot to bet a smaller amount because there's not that many hands that we're actually betting this turn with. In fact, I think most of our range checks the turn here. If we have 2 kings, we check. King, queen, any queen checks. Even something like ace-jack checks. Even ace-king with the ace of spade, with the king of spades may sort of check for pot control here. And because there's not many worse value hands that can now call our bet, even if we do have a strong hand. In the same way that we would be checking any queen or any underpair, from our opponent's standpoint, he's going to fold any queen or any underpair. So it's a really good spot to be checking with our entire range. And if we do bet, we don't really need to bet that big because we condense our opponent's calling range down to either 2 pairs sets or flushes. He doesn't really have that many ace highs in his hand that float the flop unless it's ace queen. So those are 2 pair hands anyway. So I like betting small here. I also like checking my entire range here. I think that's more standard for me. But betting small is definitely fine. So good bet sizing here. Now our opponent goes ahead and raises to 425. So I think given that our bet, as we said before, condenses our opponent's range down to 2 pairs or better, the portion of his range that raises is always flushes. I believe. I think all 2 pairs and sets is either going to raise the flop, or it's much more standard to call the turn when, you know, the worst card for 2 pair or a set comes on the turn. It's really unlikely that our opponent is now going to raise here with 2 pair or a set. It doesn't really make sense. Especially in lieu of how strong our range is when we bet. So I think our opponent's much more likely to call with his 2 pair and set hands, and since we have the king of spades in our hand, and the ace and the queen of spades are on the board, there's really no offsuit combos that our opponent could have that have one spade in them. He can't really have like jack 10 with the jack of spades. He doesn't call with that pre-flop. So I know this is a long talk about his range, but it really goes to show that his only range is really flushes. It's really hard for him to have a bluff. I don't think he can turn like 8-7 suited into a bluff here. It's just a little too crazy. So I pretty much always think my opponent has a flush, and specifically like a high flush because he called to raise pre-flop. So probably has like, I don't know, jack 9 of spades or 6-7 of spades, something like that. So I don't think he's ever going to fold a flush to a 3-bet here, so I would pretty much always be 3-betting my hand here. I guess you could call and then check raise all in on the river, but you don't really want another spade to come or the board to pair. You just kind of want your opponent to put all the money in now when he's drawing dead or very close to dead, even if he does have a set or something like that. Basically, all the hands he raises with are never going to fold the turn, so I would just go ahead and 3-bet here. Our hero does that. He makes it 925, which is a smaller 3-bet. It leaves him like 1,000 to play with on the river or something like that. But that's fine. I mean, you don't have to jam. You could just 3-bet here and he'll call or jam. And by the time that he calls, the pot's big enough that you could credibly jam any river. And I think that's the important thing here, is that the pot is big enough that you pretty much can go all in on any river. So we go ahead and 3-bet. Our opponent calls. And, now I'm still putting him on a lower flush. I think that's the most likely hand he has. Plan is to shove any river, pretty much. Except that the river comes an offsuit ace. So I think this is a really, really brutal card for us because it's really difficult that if we go all in here, we're ever bluffing. It's very, very hard. So our opponent could more easily fold, let's say, like a 7-high flush. Whereas if the river was an offsuit deuce, he's probably going to pay us off with that hand. So I still don't think that I'm beat here that often because I think it's really weird for my opponent to raise the turn and then call with a set or a straight. I think it's more likely he has a flush. That being said, there are much less combinations of flushes than there are of sets and 2 pairs. So this is a spot where it's really, really important to know your opponent, and empirical data isn't necessarily the best. It's something that you have to know your exact player. Is he capable of raising you with 2 pair on the turn? Is he capable of raising you with a set on the turn? What sort of read did you get when he 3-bet you? Those are all things that in live poker would affect my decision as to whether or not to shove on the river or check. So I would probably go ahead and shove this hand because I think it's more likely in the games I play that people are going to have a flush here than anything else. And the pot is really big. We have a small bet left, and it is what it is. So we go ahead and check because we're scared that our opponent has a set or a 2 pair, which now turned into a boat. Our opponent goes ahead and shoves, and I think here it's pretty unlikely that our opponent is going to shove a small flush, because I think that it's likely that we could check a big flush, and our check calling range is only hands that beat small flushes. So I think when our opponent shoves, he either has a big flush, which there aren't many combos of because the only one is jack 9 of spades, or he has a boat. So I think that if you check, you kind of have to check fold, but the question is there enough value to shove? And we discussed some of the reasons for that. So if I check here, I'm checking because I think that it's so likely my opponent has 2 pair of trips that I can't profitably bet, and my plan is to check fold. When we check here, I think we really have no choice but to fold. I think it's much more likely our opponent shoves with a boat than it is that he shoves with a small flush, or he doesn't have a bluff ever. I think that's impossible. So my plan here is to check fold, and to see more about my logic, and that it's things that I can't break down in this video for you. I know you gave you a lot of information, but I really go through literally all the math and show you exactly the numbers of how you should think about each decision and why you should make all these decisions. Head over to my blog, alectorelli.com. I break everything down for you there, share a lot of graphs and insights and some of the secrets and tools that I use in my game to make these decisions even more effectively. So that's it for the hand of the day. We go ahead and check. Our opponent ends up betting all in, and we call, and to our dismay, he has ace-queen, which turned into a boat. So tough luck, kind of a bad spot for us on the river. We should be getting paid there more often than not, but hey man, that's poker. Got to do it. All right, for more hand of the days, if you guys want to submit your hands, head over to alectorelli.com, send me your hands. I will select the best ones, feature them right here on this channel. Until next time, happy holidays, and see you guys next year. Cheers.